This is a TalkStation original podcast.
On this episode of Senior Moment, we talk with Mary Lou Infinito about the importance of knowing family health history and how to start the conversation with a loved one. It all starts now on Senior Moment.
Welcome to another episode of the Senior Moment with Ryan and Lin from Carteret Landing. So Lin, who do we have today?
Today we've got a very special guest, is Mary Lou Infinito. I'm so glad y'all are listening because we have some great things to talk about today. Mary Lou is a certified death doula, and she also is a nurse by background, working for ECU Health Wellness Center. So we are just going to have all kinds of good information today.
And so today we were going to talk a little bit about family history, both the importance of finding out about your family history from the sense of what everybody did, and then also to talk about the importance of finding your family health history as well. And so we were actually pre-show talking about going to Disney World. Y'all know we love Disney. And Mary Lou was talking about how important it is to make sure you get all of those intergenerational pictures, and that was just the example there. And I was sharing how when my youngest daughter was born, we took her to visit my grandmother right before she passed away, so we were able to get some four generation pictures. But welcome, Mary Lou.
Thank you so much. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you.
We kind of, what started this, and as Ryan mentioned, we've kind of brought the subject up a little bit before, is just family history, and I reference it to myself and realizing that I lost both of my parents when they were very young, and now I'm aging and going through the typical bad knees, bad shoulder, bad this, and not knowing anything about my parents. Did they have bad knees? Did they have, and just the importance of finding these things out for clinical reasons, for just pictures, moments, precious moments, which, is so important.
And on my side, I was really interested because it wasn't until I got older that I really wanted to learn about my grandparents, and would have really enjoyed hearing their stories. And I remember visiting my grandfather, and he had his photo album out, and seeing some of the pictures, and he just mentioned, that was a family house from the family that still lived in Austria, and it was bombed out during World War II. So they had an actual picture of the gardens, and it was just neat to hear that. But I wasn't interested at that point, and so we wanted to start off in talking a little bit about how can we record some of that family history. How do you're working with people, especially in preparation for their passing, and the regrets, what do people talk about, and what are some things that can be done beforehand to be able to make sure those stories continue to live on?
Well, those are some great questions. And really, a lot of the work that people can be doing these days is about digitizing some of those memories and being able to share them so easily when they're digitized. Back in the day when we had VHS tapes, you might still have some of those at your house, but if you wanted to share those with someone, they don't have a way to record and way to play those. So getting them digitized, getting them in a way where the next generation and the next generation and the next generation will still be able to view them before photos become decrepit, they crack, they discolor, all those things happen, so that we have the opportunity now to do all that digitizing and using it in picture frames that can come up and show people those pictures on an ongoing basis instead of them being in photo albums where we don't see them very often. Just like you said, your grandfather brought out the photo album. People don't do that very often, but when they're on a digital picture frame where they pop up and they run through and people can make folders to put holiday ones to come up at the holidays and things like that. It's so helpful to keep the memories of those generations behind us in front of us.
I think it just makes it, as you said, so much easier, and you will look at them more often. I mean, I've got shoebox full of photos, but they're in a closet, and I just don't get them down, whereas we look at our phone all the time. we're constantly looking at, different videos and this and that. So you're absolutely correct.
And the thing about our phone is, this may not be true for either of you, but I do have a few thousand photos on my phone. So the one I know is there that I can't find when I'm running through them to show someone, I know exactly what it looks like, but I can't put my finger on it. You can really organize those when you digitize. And that came to me in doing some legacy work where we try to get people to find out what would be important to them to leave behind. And they want those memories of the photos. And so organizing them into categories, vacations that can run in the summer months and holiday pictures at Christmas time, and creating something that will pop up each different month on some of those various picture frames. And there's a lot of choices out there. I know people have used lots of different products, but there are products out there where it's not just putting it onto a thumb drive and then the thumb drive sits in the drawer instead of the shoebox.
Right.
It's about putting them on a picture frame that sits somewhere and opens itself up every day at 10 o'clock or 9 p.m. or something. And there are some of those frames that I really advocate for people when someone is ill that you can create an email address with, where people can send a photo of these incoming generations. When someone has a baby and a person is older and can't get to them or is very gravely ill, they can see that baby. They can see intergenerationally those pictures pop up as a scheduled event every day. They get new emails that come into that picture frame, and then those photos become part of it. It's a wonderful tool.
I actually have that on my desk, and I've got an email so anybody can send a picture to it. So you're absolutely correct.
Right. Everybody should have one in their home because we would remember our families with great joy. And the people that don't bring you great joy, well, maybe they don't get photo time. I'm just saying. Just like they say, if it doesn't bring you great joy, don't keep it in your house. Maybe you don't have to scan everybody.
There you go. That's right. But I agree. Just talking to your family and digging out those memories, questions that we don't think to ask. I know both of my grandparents came in through Ellis Island. I really know nothing more than that. Never talked to them about it. We've done some research on it since. My brother has, so that's interesting, but never thought to ask them while they were here about that.
So did you get, when he did the research, the Ellis Island forms and copies of those papers? All of that is online if you look at the Ellis Island site.
He did find those and forward them to me.
Yeah, those were amazing.
Right.
You can scan those into your picture frame and make those history memories of your grandparents coming in, be part of that. Absolutely.
Yeah, but again, the big question is, or the big thing is, talk to your family. Talk to them now.
So we started, I saw an advertisement for it. I think it was on Facebook, honestly. I mean, my great-grandchildren are going to be able to follow my life basically from 25 on, because that's when I started using Facebook. But of course, the previous generations, that's not the case. But we were targeted for, I think it was because I got on Ancestry.com, and so then a company called Storyworth came up, and so for Christmas last year, we purchased Storyworth for two of my uncles and my in-laws and my parents, and it sends a question to them every week, and you can set up the questions or you can create your own questions, and so I'm thinking that this might be a way to be able to help in drawing out some of those stories. So it's not only just the pictures that we get to see, but also we can learn the actual history of the family and hear some of the stories about my great-grandfather and grandfather building a racetrack for horses up in Maine. And so the hard part, though, was actually convincing everybody that we bought it for
To do it.
because, I was saying it's not really for you all. It's for me.
Right. It's for them to leave a legacy for the generations behind them.
Do you have suggestions on how to get people to do? I mean, and I'm assuming there are other companies like Storyworth that do that.
There are, and I will honestly say they're all wonderful, but only when people put in the work. And so it sends them an email prompt every week, and in the end, what they have is 52 stories, and those 52 stories get bound into a book. And that book, so you could buy one of those books, or if someone had 6 children, you could buy 6 of them, and everyone has the book with the stories. It is an absolutely incredible tool. It doesn't have to be that way. People could journal and be given a book that has prompts in it and just write it all in. But any way that you can get people to put their thoughts and their stories on paper is incredible. And that's all personal family history as far as interactions and everything. And the other book that people need to write into is the clinical piece. You know, here's the nurse in me comes out. Everybody's having fun with family photos. And I'm like, okay, but what's the medical history in the family? What did people pass away from? What is in people's family generations? Well, take breast cancer, for example. It's very intergenerational. And so every woman should know what aunts, what cousins, whatever, because that makes a difference when they're doing testing. So it's important to know what your medical family history is, as well as your family history.
Ross, why don't we take a little early break if that's possible? Ross is back here in the background managing all the technical stuff, and we can get more into of the family medical history component after the break and talk about the importance of that and the prompting questions to be able to help and get that information.
Hi, this is Lynn Schultz at Carteret Landing. We invite you to visit our beautiful assisted living community. Carteret Landing pairs exceptional, compassionate senior care with the stylings of a resort. Our beautifully appointed suites, common areas, and bright and engaging memory care neighborhood can provide you or your loved one with the quality living they deserve. Carteret Landing is in Morehead City, right behind the Friendly Market. Come by and see us today or call for your personal tour at 252-773-0980.
Hi, this is January Brown with Eastern Carolina Council, Area Agency on Aging, and you're listening to Senior Moment.
We are back with Ryan Kelly from Carteret Landing and myself, Lynn Schultz, Carteret Landing, and Mary Lou Infinito, and just having a great talk today. And we want to talk a little bit more about, we've been talking about family history and just getting that history and talking, but we want to talk kind of more of the, I want to say clinical side, that's kind of a hard word, but just talk about knowing from your family what their medical history is. I use the example, as I stated earlier, that my parents passed early. I got married and moved away, so I really did not see them age to know what they might have been going through. I know my father had COPD. That was very obvious, but just learning things that now as I age and starting to recognize things, is this something inherited from my parents? And just, I think it's worth talking to your family and finding this out.
It's totally worth talking to your family and finding out, Lynn. I 100% agree with you. As a nurse for, well, we'll just say decades, the opportunity that people have is to be able to inform their healthcare provider about what their medical history is. So whenever someone starts with a new doctor, there should be a really good intake about what your medical history is, which should include how did your parents and your grandparents pass away, what did they die from, but also what other situations did they live through? How many generations of people were diabetic or hypertensive? A lot of times things tend to be, what the word that they use in healthcare is familial. They're not necessarily passed down, but there's a tendency towards them within families. And that's one thing that happens. And then other things are actually passed down. So genetics and familial traits are two components of it, but we have to know the history to be able to let doctors decipher through. And when someone's ill, sometimes just some little piece of tidbit can be so important, including a lot of times we have mixed families, and intergenerationally we have adoptions from children from other countries and people from other surrogate moms and everything. All those things play a piece. And so when someone's in any situation, they should get as much medical history as they can from everybody involved and just note it. You know, it doesn't have to be tattooed on anybody. That would be expensive. But having it be part of people's history can be very, very helpful. I'm sure we all have stuff that's we call run in the family, right? Anything on your side that runs in your family, Ryan?
Well, I was going to actually ask you about how to have these conversations, because I remember, so Alzheimer's runs in my family, and I remember the only way that I kind of knew that was that I read a story that my great uncle had written about his grandfather, who they had to eventually take out to the farm in New York because he was crazy, in their words, and every day he would try to walk back to the city, and one of the boys had to dress up as a chauffeur because he would only get into a chauffeured car and drive the car until they found Grandpa on the side of the road, and Grandpa would tell him, "Where are you going?" And they'd say, "We're going to the city," and Grandpa would get into the car, and then they'd turn around and take Grandpa back to the farm. But especially when I was younger, and number one, trying to get me to the doctor in the first place. But when I finally did go to the doctor and you're filling out all the family history, I just whatever. And it wasn't until later that I started to realize the importance, but also, how do you suggest having that serious conversation with your parents? I mean, that's not something that at 25 I'm looking to talk about. So it's almost one of those that your parents need to bring up with you. But how do you suggest, from either end, bringing up those you're a specialist in these hard conversations. So how do we start those, and how do we get people to have them?
It's funny because back in the day, a lot of things didn't get talked about. There was a lot of silence, which was never all that helpful, whether it be in mental health or in physical health. But the actual thing that's probably key is so many people are interested in things related to genealogy. And there's so many websites where people get their genealogy and go online and look at things. And it's really important if people are interested in that, to be able to just take that one step further. I love knowing this history, and in addition to knowing where, in what country, what percentage of my background comes from India or England or Ireland or whatever, to know about the medical piece. And so it's almost like a puzzle, putting together the pieces of the puzzle. And so when people start sitting down and putting it on paper, they can put them on index cards and lay it out generationally. It helps them be able to see how far back does this tendency go. And you're correct. Lots of times back in the day, people would say grandma or grandpa was crazy, or, they didn't really know. They would just call it old age. They would call it dementia in a different kind of a way, where they just thought it was the natural part of aging. Well, now we know it's not the natural part of aging. Now that we have a better understanding of, but dementia is a big umbrella, and then there's lots of ways people get it: hypertensive, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's. All those diseases can have a tendency towards that. So you'd have to know what the original diagnosis was that may have led them there. And so it's okay to just ask questions. And sometimes people say, "Oh, I don't know, I don't want to talk about it." And what you've still done is you've planted the seed that you want to know. Mm-hmm. And then people sometimes think of something and go, you asked me some questions, and so I thought about this, about your grandfather. Maybe this would be something you'd like to know. Because I suggest to people, sometimes they leave a little stack of index cards. If you think of anything that might be helpful to me, to make sure that I know, not just for me, but when I have children, what do I need to know? And that's often when people start to want to know, is when they have children. Like, I wonder if there's anything in my medical history that I should know. It's better to find all that stuff out when everybody's well and healthy, because when there's a health crisis, that's not the time to try to be trying to figure out what your medical history is. It's better to have it in your back of your mind and already be asking those questions. Does that seem like it makes sense?
It certainly does. Now, I love the idea of the index cards. I mean, that's a really simple and easy. Are there other resources that you're aware of? I mean, I know Google is, you can just Google, but are there other resources or areas that you can direct people that might be able to help in narrowing down those questions to be asking? And
yes, there definitely is. You could Google for questions for getting my family medical history, but you can also go online and look at any place where someone's going to start seeing a new doctor, and look at the new patient forms for lots of doctors' offices. Because if you look at what they want to know about your medical history, and it's not all medical, like genetically, but how many people smoked, how many people had a lot of other tendencies that bring on various different diseases, those are helpful things. And then if people look in like a Word document and create a template for the hierarchy of it in terms of putting that family tree together, that's what people do with a lot of information on some of these ancestry and the various different programs that you were talking about, where you got the Ellis Island information. So yes, there's all those ways. And any good medical textbook, if somebody's just wanting to do research in the library, teaches young doctors how to ask questions and what questions to ask to be able to help them figure out what the medical history of a new patient is.
I was joking about my great grandfather. How important is it? How far back should I be trying to get the information from, my parents or grandparents? And
everything you get has the potential to be helpful down the road. And once they're gone, you're not going to be able to get it from them. So whatever they know, you should write down. You should absolutely just document any evidence of whatever history, whether it be where people traveled, what they did, all those kind of fun things, as well as all the medical issues that they had in their lifetime. Cancers, and sometimes people don't think about cancer when they're just getting moles removed back in the day because they didn't always biopsy something when they removed things. So knowing that there was a tendency towards growths on their hand or their arms and they kept removing a mole or a spot or whatever, there's a good chance that that might have been some type of a skin cancer that could have led to something. That could be a family history of a cancer issue, is a possibility. It's not documented that way, but knowing it kept happening tells you there probably was some underlying something that was happening. So it's good for doctors to know what are those things. Go back as far as you can.
I agree. Go back as far as you can, because history is history and knowledge is knowledge. So every little piece that you can get, I would think it'd be so helpful. And, to go off what you're saying, anytime you go to a doctor, all the questions are all they want to know, your mom, your dad, did they want to know all that.
Yep.
So it's a good way to say, hey, I'm getting ready to go to the doctor. They're going to ask these questions. So I'm going to ask you.
And you can often go on any doctor's office. They'll have the new patient forms. You could just print out a copy, and that's a good conversation starter. They want to know all these things from me, but I don't know them, but you might know them. Can you help me get my medical records up to date? Can you be able to do that in terms of getting information? And, history is history and we can't change it, but we also can't get it once those people are gone.
Right.
Unless you have, back in the day when a doctor's office would go shut down, they would actually physically hand people the paper chart, and people would often have an old chart to be able to peruse and look through. I remember we had that of my dad's and looking at that medical history. Well, that's not going to happen anymore. With electronic medical records, it's a matter of who has access to the electronic medical record, how long it will stay there once someone passes away. Those kinds of things are different in different systems. So getting it and creating, and I always suggest to families, just create one notebook so that all the information is in one place. And if you had to go and look for something, you wouldn't be searching through files and files and files. But, one notebook, one folder, one 3-ring binder, something all about medical history of the family, both sides, however you do it.
And it reflects back on what you said earlier, is in a time of crisis.
Yes.
It's not the time to be looking through and researching and
starting from nothing.
Got a notebook, it's all right there. Keeps it very simple.
And when you tag those things of how many generations, I'm happy that you can remember those stories, because maybe you're not in the dementia mode yet, Ryan. So that's always a good sign. So, as long as you can keep remembering it clearly, that's a good thing, and keep telling that story.
Well, luckily that story's written down.
There you go. Excellent. And getting the recordings. It's wonderful to have recordings. That's one thing I was going to say before when we were talking about scanning pictures. They do make picture frames. I love these picture frames. I encourage people to get them and use them, where they have a chip in them and the person can make a personal message for the person. I encourage people to get a picture of them and the person and make a message for them. That child, that person will always have a photo of them with the person and their voice. Once a voice is gone, we don't have it anymore in a personal message. So that's a wonderful tool also in terms of recording and retaining family history. I love those kinds of projects.
My grandmother she used to tell me all the time, she goes, she grew up in Germany. I mean, the stories she could tell, that she goes, we need to sit down and make a recording, and I never did, and I so regret it, because her stories would have been phenomenal.
Would have made a good book.
Oh my gosh, it would.
You could have been her in the movie.
When I get a little older, yes.
There you go.
Well, Mary Lou, I want to thank you for coming on today.
My pleasure.
This has been a great conversation. You're going to come back for our next episode.
Will.
And so I'm excited about that. We're going to be talking about what's an even more difficult conversation to have, and talking about preparing for your death and the steps to take to be ensured that you get what you want.
Hopefully. That's the plan anyway.
Yes,
that's what we work, that's what we strive towards. That's right.
Well, thank you very much again for coming on the Senior Moment. We
You're
appreciate
welcome.
it.